If I hire somebody who's not from Germany, if I hire somebody who's, let's say, from Poland or Czech or Croatia or Romania or Portugal, this is going to be like at least 2 times cheaper for me. And they're like, oh my God, this is like an exciting idea. Plus they're going to deliver the same amount of quality work, because like there was no study done that would show that Germans are better workers than Portuguese people. You know what I'm saying? Or like any other nation. If somebody is good at what they do, it doesn't really matter where they come from. So then the CEO has this great idea and he's like, okay, I'm going to do that. And now let's assume that he knows how to advertise across countries, which majority don't, but let's say he does. So he knows how to do that. And then once he figures out how much loss there is, he basically just quits on the idea and he goes back and hires in Germany, because there is no way he figures out, okay, for Portugal, I have to do this. For Poland, I have to do this. There, I have to do this. And then basically once they get to that realization, they either like retreat on the idea of, global team, or they engage you.
Hi everyone, and welcome to your next episode of the Freedom of Work podcast. So today we're going to be delving into what European founders teach us about the future of global hiring. So really interesting topic. And today I am joined by Filip. So yeah, if you want to take it away, introduce yourself and tell the listeners and the watchers a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Hey, first, thank you so much for having me. My name is Filip. Obviously, I used to spend my youth playing basketball. So this is where I got my drive. But then obviously, because that didn't work out, I went into the business, and currently I'm running DonnaPro. It's a virtual executive assistant agency where we match top 1% of executive assistants from European Union with CEOs and founders across the planet. So I'm assuming we will talk, like we said, a lot about remote culture and everything. So I'm pretty excited to get started.
Interesting. Yeah, I can't wait to delve into it and learn a little bit about yourself and how you sort of got to where you are today. So as far as I know, where you first started, I guess it was in the career of door-to-door sales. Probably not the easiest way to begin. Definitely isn't. But yeah, it's a great little way to get yourself into the door, I guess.
Yeah.
So what did, I guess, that first initial experience teach you about communication and resilience?
Yeah. So it was really like a school of hard knocks, so to speak, because there are 2 ways how you can do door-to-door sales. There is a way where you have a call center in the back end and they call on your behalf and they say, hey, this and this guy is going to be around, like you should book a slot or something like that. And then you have the other way of doing door-to-door sales, which was the way we were doing, which was we didn't have a call center. We just arrived in the apartment complex or the village or the town or whatever. And we just like showed up and started knocking across houses or apartments. And, as you can imagine, majority of the time you get a no. So you really have to learn 2 things, like you said. One is just like mastering your inner game, because, you have to show up on the next door. I mean, even if the person before cursed you out basically, or started like threatening or throwing things at you, or there was a dog who really like barked at you in a very like threatening way, you have to pick yourself up and be like fresh, excited, and like spot on your next door. So it really like teaches you how to like balance yourself, not take things personally. And it really it really helps you develop that resilience. And then in terms of communication and persuasion, like when I was doing the calculation, I knocked in 1 year on between the 9,000 to 11,000 doors. So when you go through so many doors, basically you get very good at reading people and then obviously communicating to them, because whoever opens up, unless they are extremely drunk, they will have a very high degree of skepticism. And then you have to know how to, ease the situation, how to interrupt their pattern with some sort of a smart question, or how just, be there and really like get their attention in the first place. So you learn a lot of those things. And sometimes when somebody asks me what's one of the best advices I can give on career, I'm like, if somebody has the guts, I think door-to-door sales can really give you a lot. It's not the nicest experience. And I really didn't see myself doing that for 40 years, but it really gave me a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I think that really does describe it, doesn't it? You don't really know what's waiting behind the door. So I think that definitely helps bring you sort of in touch with what communication you need to be putting forward and how resilient you need to be. And I guess sort of bringing that to sort of today and what we're sort of seeing where you came from and where you are today with those sort of early lessons at the door in terms of like persuasion and self-management, making sure you're analysing the situation. Do you think this has maybe helped you influence the way you are now leading these remote teams?
Yeah, I even developed a saying, something like, if you want to lead anybody, then you first have to know how to lead yourself. And then obviously that experience with door-to-door sales helped me because, a lot of leaders, again, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I can still improve by a lot, but, whenever something happens, when I compare whatever is happening to like a guy screaming at you, like when I was doing door-to-door sales, like I really learned to be at peace in like any situation. So once I can be calm, once I can be rational about the situation, I can obviously react better. And also, like, if you're in business, in all areas, like you have to communicate with vendors, you have to communicate with clients, you have to communicate with your team. If you have that know-how on how to establish common ground, how to persuade somebody, how to maybe even negotiate with somebody, or how to like do everything that fits into the communication, that obviously makes it easier for you. So I would say that, anybody who had arrived from sales to business and leadership, I think they can really like take a lot of things from there. What's tricky there is when people are very good at sales. I mean, there is a very thin line between being good at sales and then just really start manipulating people in a very bad way and just started lying, or just, you know, just developing some stories that are not true. So you really have to be like aware, and like while you understand that you're very powerful in communication, you still have to have, the moral compass on what is right and what is not right, because otherwise you can really cause a lot of damage, not only to yourself but to your company, to clients, to vendors. Because if you start overplaying on that sales card, it can actually like come like a boomerang like later and can really kill your business basically. So you have to have that transparent part of yourself where it should be.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, yeah, that word transparency and as we sort of talked about self-management there, because once you sort of know how to control yourself, then you can control everyone, especially in a remote environment, which is probably the trickiest sort of people to control as well at the moment, because they're remote. You have to make sure you're constantly communicating with them. You have to be transparent by the things that are happening within the business. So yeah, I think that really does transition in like a really like unique and special way. So I really do like that. And I guess then you've gone from this door to door to then was teaching sales to then running a marketing agency, as what I recall. So now you're
Correct.
leading this remote company. What's this sort of biggest leadership shift in your style from sort of the start of that to like where you are now?
Yeah. So when somebody asks me for the biggest shift, I always want to state a disclaimer, because always when you're presenting something as the one shift, people can think that this is going to be the magic pill. So I always say that while there is obviously always the most important thing, like if you only do that and if you do everything else in a wrong manner, then that one thing is not going to help you out. So maybe instead of me talking about one thing, I'll talk about the three most important things very briefly, because I really don't want to focus on that one, because like then people can be like, oh, I just need to do that and I'll be fine. No, like you have to do like a lot of things right to have a cool business. Now, so the first thing, and maybe what was happening at the beginning, even in sales, and then later on when I was starting with a marketing agency, I had a tendency to trigger on certain things when I was leading or dealing with people. And then at some stage, because at that point I was listening to a lot of Grant Cardone, and like he had like one, that person is today I think like the CEO of his companies, and he said like, look, whatever is happening in your company and you feel like you should blame somebody else, don't, because you're the one who had built the company, you're the one who had hired that person, you're the one who onboarded that person to some degree. So whatever is happening in your universe, the only person you should blame is yourself. And this is really a hard lesson. I mean, it's very easy to understand it in theory. Okay, have that extreme ownership. That's very easy to understand. But when the situation comes, it's very natural to any leader to start being defensive, start projecting the mistake on somebody else, when in reality, I mean, it's not so much about who is to blame, but it's more like, if I accept the fact that that this is somebody else's fault, then there is nothing I can do about it. Then I basically lose the power to be the cause, not to be the effect, not the cause. Sorry, like English is not my native language. You probably know what I mean. So this is a very important concept, and like it even goes broader. Like, you know, let's say you live in the country, and as far as I know you, you understand it. So let's say you live in UK and you really don't like the UK weather. So technically you can be, I mean, I'm not going to apply extreme ownership to the weather because I can really not control the weather. True, you cannot control the weather, but we live on the free planet. So technically, if you don't like living in UK, you can simply move to another country. Like nobody's restricting you, like unless you're in prison. Okay, then you have certain problems, but you know what I'm saying. So extreme ownership would definitely be one. And then two others that I sometimes highlight. The second one is that when I was young, and I'm still young to some degree, but when I was younger, I really had that desire to be liked, because everybody more or less has that. And then the more I was growing up in a leadership way, the more I figured out like, this is not really about me being liked. This is more about me delivering the result, keeping the performance high, making the company perform. So that doesn't mean that I don't want to be liked. I still want to be liked, but this is now not my main idea when I think about business, because if you are too focused on being liked, then when you will have to deliver like a hard truth to somebody, or when you will have to like fire somebody who's actually like toxic to the culture or whatever, you're not going to do it because you're so like into this, I have to be liked. So I really went more from, I have to do what's right for the company, what's right for the culture, even if it's hard, even if it's not pleasant. I have to do this because like my whole idea of leadership is more or less today, it's not my priority to be liked, so to speak. Does that make sense to some degree? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. And then the third thing I would say is just as a leader, you obviously influence. Okay, if you're selling a service, you influence like, okay, how much clients that company is going to have and how you guys are going to grow, and you also influence, okay, how our HR pipeline is going to look like. And what I figured out in leadership is that, if specifically talking about HR, if you have a very small HR pipeline and if you have a very bad systems as a company, then you will have that subconscious tendency to basically be very afraid if somebody leaves, because you're like, okay, if they leave, there is nothing systemized. They're the only one who know what's going on. I have nobody in the HR pipeline. So if they leave, we're going to like have real problems for next 90 days. And until you are in that state, it's very hard to manage somebody, and it's even harder to challenge somebody, because at the moment where you should challenge that person and be like, hey, this should be done better, or those KPIs don't work, you retreat back because you know that, well, if I challenge them too much, they might quit. And if they quit, I will have a problem. So to sum it up, like, first of all, I mean, the first idea was not really wanting to be, I mean, not really having being liked as a priority. Then the second was extreme ownership. And then the third one is really like making sure that you have your HR pipeline full and your systems in place, so you don't become too dependent on one person. Um, because then you will start probably making too much compromises, and it's going to affect the whole company sooner or
yeah,
later.
definitely. Yeah, I think that like learning that it's not sort of all about to be liked, it's shifting towards ownership, clarity, making sure that you're focusing on like accountability and alignment. It's like those sort of top level thoughts. That obviously a balance in between like being decisive and being empathetic, and all that probably builds into the fact that, okay, let's see where we're at if this person leaves. Is there anybody in the pipeline? What can we do in terms of the team? Is there enough people in the team if somebody leaves? And just sort of always like looking into the future almost, rather than looking now and what's like happened. It's like that sort of projection. Not keep not being keeping like yourself a little bit uncomfortable, making sure you're not all cozy. You're just sort of keeping yourself on your toes. Yeah, definitely. I really like those three things. And then so before DonnaPro, then you worked at, was it Spark Marketing?
Yeah. Spark marketing agency. Yes.
Yeah. So is there anywhere that you've sort of realized maybe before that, when you come your sort of realization for why DonnaPro was needed? Was there a first notice of like the bottleneck of leaders, like perhaps like doing too much for themselves, or like how did that outlook look to help you sort of get more?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not gonna lie. It started with me, because when Spark grew to like 15 people approximately, which is not a huge number, but it's enough to get overwhelmed fast. I mean, what was working well back then is that I had a awesome assistant, and that was working well. But despite of me having a great assistant, because the company didn't have the necessary systems to scale, I and my executive assistant, we both started being the bottleneck to some degree, because like too many decisions had to go through us, and like there was no systems in place how to like really move the company forward. So I was the ultimate bottleneck that really realized, okay, like something has to change there in terms of either working better with executive assistant, or in terms of like systems across the whole company. But the true realization and the true idea for DonnaPro came when we started losing clients, because clients were becoming the bottlenecks of their own business. And I started to be pissed at like, oh my God, like what's going on? Because here's how that worked. Yeah, here's how that worked. Like people came to us, and those were usually like companies between, I don't know, 5 to 50 employees. So we're not talking like these huge corporations, but like 5 to 50 employees. And they came to us and they were like, hey, Filip, like our marketing is not working. We need you guys like to do our marketing. And okay, I'm not gonna lie, there were some cases where our marketing didn't really perform. Like we were not perfect, like nobody is, I think. But in majority of cases where our marketing worked, a lot of times what happened was that after a few months of advertising, we got an email at 2 in the morning from a CEO of like the CEO on the client side. And they were like, guys, I really like you. What you're doing in marketing is amazing, but like we just cannot keep up with all of the demand, and we cannot grow internally because first of all, I'm the bottleneck because I don't have assistant. I don't have an assistant, and also we don't have any systems to scale. So I'm very sorry. We love you, but we just have to pause this marketing idea for a while because like we're dying because of what you guys are doing to us. So when I when I saw that, I was like, oh shit, like we really have to do something to help those CEOs be able to scale smarter, just live smarter. So that was really the true seed for DonnaPro in my head.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I feel like it's funny that it started off as yourself and then realizing that they were getting bottlenecked to be able to work with you, and then found this solution from that.
Yeah, I mean, our first clients at DonnaPro were our Spark clients, actually, or people who were somehow connected to Spark. So yeah, this is where we developed our beta version. But it was a very a thorough process, so to speak, because when we and this comes a little bit more into the business building, but it might be relevant to some listeners. Like when I got this idea, okay, something should be done here. And because at the same time, then Spark already stabilized at those like 14, 13 employees. And I really figured out that, I mean, I have leaders there. They can lead the company. I'm not really that needed much more in the Spark environment. Like the company can sustain itself. It can just be without me. And then I was like, okay, what's going to be my next move? And then there was like this half a year of a research phase. And before we started our beta with those Spark clients, I really researched the whole market. which is something I'm extremely proud of. At the same time, I'm not really that proud on certain things that I had to do during that research. But the point was, I basically took 15 biggest virtual executive agencies that exist on this planet. And because they had no idea who I am, I just did my due diligence and I called them pretending to be a client. And I really figured out on like, okay, how they operate, how they qualify. And then because, I wanted to invest money into my research, I was like, okay, so if somebody really is bottlenecking and they don't want to have an in-house solution, but they want to go for a virtual assistant agency and hire somebody through that virtual assistant agency model, how is that going to look like? And I was like, okay, now I've mystery shopped them. Now I have to buy their services. So I bought uh, executive assistants that I actually bought their service. And then I really saw how the industry works from the inside out, what kind of a quality is being delivered. And to some degree, it was good. The whole industry is more than like a $1 billion in like annual revenue. So it's not that small of an industry. However, I saw a lot of blind spots. And when I compared like what I got with the relationship I had with my current assistant back then, I was like, okay, this could be done so much better. And then like DonnaPro started to develop. And when we got those first clients, okay, it was beta. We were still figuring some things out. And then as we moved, from there to today, we obviously, with every new client, we got better and better and better. And today, I think whatever we are offering is really working well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I just thought this was relevant to some degree. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, definitely. I really like that. I think it helps you understand exactly what was happening and what was needed out there. And I guess then now you're working with so many CEOs and European CEOs as well every day. How are you then, after you're sort of seeing this as they work, how do you describe perhaps the European approach to leadership?
Yeah. So when I work with Europeans, when we work with Europeans, you have to understand there is no ultimate blueprint. You can find an European who can act like an American, and you can find an American who can act like an European. But overall, if you try to compare like the cultures or just maybe focus more on the European culture, I think Europeans, in my way, they will think things through. They will not maybe be so inspiration based and be like, okay, I have an idea, let's go. They will like do a lot of planning. They will share a lot of context. They will ask a lot of questions. They will a lot of times want to review a contract a few times before they sign it. But here is the funny part. Once they commit, like they let go immediately. So basically the way to do business with them or way how they operate is like they over prepare to some degree. And I'm the same to some degree. So I over prepare, but then once I feel I'm ready, I pull the trigger and I just go all in into that direction. Because if you really prepare well, then it's actually much easier to perform on whatever you said you're going to perform, because now you have a plan and you're not improvising that much because you have clarity. So I think this is something that really that I would really say for Europeans and even myself to some degree.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's that planning, but also like being very collaborative with the planning, finding out every little part of it, making sure like there's going to be long-term success, long-term sustainability in the project that you're sort of building towards, and making sure those questions are being asked. And feel like you put like a lot of trust in as well, in what you've suggested, making sure that through like the relationship building, through communication, you're making sure that it's all like ready to go with this sort of cultural part of it as well, which is building into that, the sort of collaboration, communication, before you sort of go fully into it. So yeah. And then as we're sort of talking about the European aspect of this then, so we know that Europe has a few and fair different complex labour laws and cross-border hiring regulations, which is obviously where we can help, name drop. But this has helped shaped the adoption, or has it, do you think, helped shape the adoption of remote and flexible models in Europe?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way that Europe is so complex, like helps our company, it helps your company as well. Because I was just, when I'm thinking, for example, let's say you're the CEO or founder in Germany, okay? And then you want to grow your team. And let's say you're to some degree committed to the remote idea. So you're not the old fashioned founder who wouldn't like know what remote is, but you're like, okay, I'm going to be in Germany. I'm going to build this company or whatever. And like, we're going to talk about the remote idea. And then at some point you're like, if I really want to attract best people, and if we're remote anyway, why would I focus only on Germany? And then you're like, okay, that could be a good idea. Maybe we can like, find talent across borders. And then, especially if you're from Germany, you start doing the math and you're like, but wait, if I hire somebody who is not from Germany, and if I hire somebody who is, let's say, from Poland or Czech or Croatia or, Romania or Portugal, this is going to be like at least 2 times cheaper for me. And they're like, oh my God, this is like an exciting idea. Plus, they're going to deliver the same amount of quality work because like there was no study done that would show that Germans are better workers than Portuguese people. You know what I'm saying? Or like any other nation. Like if somebody is good at what they do, it doesn't really matter where they come from. So then the CEO has this great idea and he's like, okay, I'm going to do that. Okay. And now let's assume that he knows how to advertise across countries, which majority doesn't, don't, but let's say he does. So he knows how to do that. And then once he figures out how much paperwork there is and how much laws there is, and like he basically just quits on the idea and he goes back and hires in Germany because there is no way he figures out, okay, for Portugal I have to do this, for Poland I have to do this, there I have to do this. And then basically once they get to that realization, they either like retreat on the idea of global team, or they engage you, or in case of executive assistants, they engage us and we help them out because like our company and your company, we have figured out like what it means to do business in different countries. We know how to do the setup. We know how to find the best people there. We know how to put together the right legal structure so the client gets the talent they want without like being overwhelmed with all of the papers and with finding that talent and training that talent and managing that talent. So, I think the fact that Europe is very complex actually helps us a lot. And then once you start talking about the UK, it adds another layer of complexity because you have the European Union, which is like a separate ecosystem. Then you have UK. Okay, then in Switzerland, they're still a little bit, I mean, they're different than UK and a little bit different than in like Europe. So it's like, it's a very big puzzle to solve. And I'm actually quite happy that puzzle exists.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. I think even though there is those different complex labour laws and sort of cross-border regulations, I think it's very much shape and help how Europe is working, and globally as well. Obviously, those rules apply everywhere, but yeah, people are trying to be a lot more like compliance focused and making sure it's not just like a nice to have perk, but it's like a very structured way of working. And I think that's really nice how like we can slot into that, and hopefully like the rise of employer of record services to help handle all that side of things means only more pushing towards local remote hubs, digital nomad spaces, remote working, and sort of that the hire anywhere approach and working remotely, definitely. And I think as we sort of look on in comparison to maybe other parts of the world, including perhaps US companies, do you think in comparison US companies perhaps often misunderstand European work culture or like the productivity that we've got here?
Yeah, I think to some degree they do. And to some degree, even us Europeans don't sometimes understand other Europeans. So I wouldn't really blame that on US totally. But I mean, if you look at broader picture, I think because I also used to study and live in States for 2 years, and obviously I talk to a lot of people from US and we have clients from US, etc. Like in US, in majority of the cases, what they believe is, in my opinion, if somebody is available 24/7, that means they are reliable. That means that you can count on them. That means they're going to be the first one who get the promotion, or they're just going to think like, okay, if they reply to my email in 7 minutes, that's a good worker. If they reply to my email in 3 hours, that's a bad worker. I'm simplifying the concept, but you probably know where I'm aiming. Whether in Europe, at least in companies where we work with, and when we like talk a lot about the async concepts, like we actually have the anti-rule, and my belief is actually like different, because like if I have a team member, employee, contractor, or a client, or whoever, who replies to me in 7 minutes of receiving the email every time, that means that their whole day is just spent reacting to life and not doing any deep work. So I think a lot of Europeans, not all, but a lot, have figured out, okay, it's actually important for me to have balance. It's actually important for me to have deep work slots. It's actually important for me not to be online on Slack at all. It's actually important for me that, I will have my slots when I will reply to internal communication, etc. Okay, if somebody calls you and it's urgent, that's different. But like all of those, emails, Slacks, Asanas, WhatsApps, like emails, like I'm not going to be there. And like I teach my team members, like, look, if you want to do any like meaningful work, if you're just going to be stuck on the email the whole day, okay, yes, the person on our side might feel you're productive, but you're really not going to be, because like you will not do anything besides context switching the whole time and not doing anything meaningful. So I think that's a big difference in my opinion. What do you think? Does that hold true to some degree?
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. But I also think sometimes, especially in remote settings, context switching can be a lot easier as well to do, because we feel like sometimes you haven't got the accountability of being sat next to someone and being like openly productive and like a task as well. I think sometimes you have to be very conscious about context switching. So it's very easy to fall into that replying, because sometimes I think it's difficult, because people sometimes want to chat to people to keep that communication up as well, because they don't want to feel like they're not on communication in remote environments. But yeah, I definitely feel that as well. I think the work-life balance in maybe Europe is probably like a lot more like looked upon. Like we maybe have a lot more paid leave compared to like the US, and like things like, I think there's a lot more companies that are open up to like the shorter work week at the moment, like the 4-day work week and things. And like paid time off isn't like a perk to us. It's actually a minimum requirement.
Yeah,
and obviously
by law.
they don't have that. So I think that probably builds into this like productivity and collaboration thought process of us being like, no, actually we're off, we're not going on our laptop or thing. But maybe due to that sort of minimum law that is set in place, maybe that actually impacts their like communication and constantly trying to sort of be on top of that. So yeah, I think they probably work hand in hand, and it makes us them probably pushing for like those longer work days. Well, we'd more of a make sure we're getting the work done in that 9 till 5, and then we can switch off, and that's that. But
and it's actually more sustainable, because like I mean, like it's not that. I mean, I could be online 24/7, but for how long? Like I can do that maybe for 1 year if I stretch myself, maybe for 2. But like if you're optimizing for long term, like you should be able to like know when to relax, when to switch off, and like I mean, yes, I mean, even if you are the CEO, like yes, you have to be able to put your phone on the airplane mode, or like being like, okay, now it's family time. That doesn't mean I'm going to check my email every 15 minutes, but now that means it's family time. I'm going to be with my kid and try to be there. So, that's, I think that's a big shift.
like I did a webinar last month, and it was someone was on there, the founder of Hubstaff. I'll shout out, why not? And he said when he knows to take a step back is when the business is running him rather than him running the business. I think that's quite a good little pointer to add in there. It's actually, you need to take a step back and like look at the business rather than think I'm getting carried away by the business thing. And I think that's a nice little sort of pointer there as well.
My lord, I see not how this pertaineth to the data analyst position.
If thou can extract a sword, thou can extract data. Thunder and badgers, from whence do ye hail, mighty peasant?
Vancouver!
Vancouver? Nay, we cannot employ internationally. The fees, the red tape. It must be put back. Be gone, Canadian!
As we sort of talk about like this communication and like transparency, I think these words are popping up a little bit. So how does then trust, do you think it differs in terms of like a European context when building distributed teams, or quite similar when it's remotely? Yeah. What do you think the word sort of trust means in a European context?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a very good question. The problem is I don't really know how to answer it in the right way, because I know that, again, every company is different to some degree. Now, if we're talking about a remote setup, okay, you obviously need to trust your people more, because you do not see them, they're not in the same office, you cannot have lunch with them. So you just, by default, if we're talking about a remote setup, if we're talking about remote setup in Europe, you just have to, by default, trust people more. Now, the way we do it at DonnaPro, and I think that would probably be the most valuable thing I can say here. I'm not claiming that this is the template by which all of the European companies operate, but this is something that I can just directly tell you might be interesting, because look, one of the core things, in my opinion, is that trust starts being built in all companies, not just at DonnaPro. It starts being built throughout the HR process, because throughout the job listing and the whole HR process, and you will know that the candidate is being promised certain things. The candidate has usually questions, the leadership answers those questions, and just the way how the company presents itself through the HR process, it creates that some sort of expectation in the candidate's head. And now the biggest mess up can already happen here, because if you just look at the HR process as something, okay, I'm just gonna just overclaim everything in my HR process, I'm not gonna talk about any downsides at working at our company. If you do that, then the candidates come with that unicorn idea of how amazing it's going to be to work at that company, and there is no flaws, and there are only like rainbows and unicorns and stuff like that. And then when they start working and the reality hits differently, then basically whatever trust there was from the candidate, it drops. And it goes the same in the other way, because like when you're interviewing a candidate, they will present themselves in a certain manner. They will tell you they know how to do certain things. And again, if they lie or if they oversell, then you as somebody who's going to work with them, then you're going to be disappointed. So I think that the key for trust building, at least at DonnaPro, is really, we have a very long HR process. It's like a 6-week long HR process. We take all of not only our executive assistants, but also like our corporate team members, we take them through the more or less the same process. We really talk to them a lot about what it means to work at DonnaPro. They have a chance to ask a lot of questions, but at the same time, we really send them a lot of things in advance. So it's not like, okay, they apply, they have one interview and then they're hired, but it's like, okay, they go through this whole process. Plus we share like upfront, like we have like articles like, hey, like this is what's good at DonnaPro, this is what's bad. Because the one thing that I want to avoid, and one thing that I think everybody should want to avoid, is the worst situation you can have is you hire somebody and then you have a situation 6 weeks after, or like 1 year after, and the candidate is like, or the people who works at your company, they're like, oh, I didn't know that. And then you have this whole tension, because like you withdraw certain information from them at the beginning. So we really try to communicate upfront, like by everything. Okay, like this is how and they get to read everything, articles. They read basically all of our main internal policies before they start working. Okay, obviously they read the contract because they have to by law, but like we just communicate everything in advance so that relationship starts well. And then even after it starts, and I think that's going to hold true for all for majority of European companies. Like, it's not only the HR process, but once that person is onboarded, I think you're going to agree as well that in Europe, or even overall, like I think that trust building is an ongoing process. Like I think if you're just, okay, now they're here, now we trust each other, and now we're just not going to invest into that relationship. We're not going to be transparent. We're not going to have the conversations. We're not going to have the check-ins. We're not going to, try to actually create a good environment, or on the team member side, if they're not going to be delivering good work, then that trust is going to erode. So like I think everybody just have to work towards keeping that trust high. I think that to some degree answers your question. Hopefully, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's embedding it into the process from the very, very beginning. I think especially in distributed teams and remote teams, like it's much easier for people to lose your trust, because if they feel like you're hiding something just because you're sat behind a screen, it's much easier for you to lose that talent. And that could have been someone that maybe you were trying to recruit for, you don't know, 6 months to a year. And once you've found that person that perfectly fits in your team, you have to make sure that you're constantly building that trust with them, making sure they're feeling appreciated with not only like the professional part of them, but also like making sure they're getting good perks and well-beings and being appreciated if maybe they can't do a certain task because they need a certain software, making sure they get given that, because the second that they're starting to pull back because they don't have the right things to do their job, they're maybe being micromanaged, they're having too many deliverables, they can't complete their project. Like all these things are only due to the first thing, which was probably trust in the first place, because you're not having the trust to be able to say, or don't feel like you can be trusted, or they don't trust you enough to say, actually reach out and say, I need a bit of this, I need a bit of help here, we need some more support here. And if you don't have those at the very beginning and that trust in the foundation, then it's not going to be sort of a good relationship to build upon and build like a successful career for the individual. So yeah, definitely I think it's embedding it from the get-go and making sure that they feel like really appreciated in their role, because at the end of the day, like you're appreciating them. That's why you hired them. That's why you needed them in the first place. So really embedding that in. I like that. So we sort of talked about like how you've got to where you are, that sort of European founder mindset, which is really interesting to go into sort of the different regulations and the trust sections. So I guess if we go into sort of the reality of global hiring and perhaps like what's actually working, it would be good to sort of delve into these type of things. So is there any sort of perhaps like the most common like delegation mistakes that you've seen founders making when you're speaking to them every day, or what those tasks are? And perhaps if we're also speaking about global hiring as well, if there's anything that you've seen in terms of mistakes, yeah, it'd be really good to delve into that.
Yeah, we can do that. Now, in terms of hiring and the whole delegation process, I think there are two key things, because the problem is majority of the companies don't really plan hiring, and then they have some sort of an emergency or somebody quits, and then their only focus is, I'm going to hire that person as soon as possible. Like whoever is breathing and is at least to some degree aligned with the role, I'm just gonna get them, grab them, and onboard them. And that's really a problem, because if you don't take enough time for the HR process, and especially onboarding, because like I was talking about the HR process before, but like one thing that I see with delegation is, okay, if you want to delegate effectively, that person has to first understand the context of your company and the context of your culture. If they don't have that, you can be the best delegator, but they're going to fail, because like that delegation is not going to fit in your ecosystem. So HR process is important, but the onboarding process is as if not more important, because once majority of people come to majority of workplaces, I mean, you've probably worked at more companies and you have a career, so you know what it means. But sometimes you just come into a place, or I've heard those stories, I don't know if they are true, but like you come to work somewhere, they're like, okay, it's your first day, welcome, this is Susie, she's gonna talk to you for 10 minutes, then here is your laptop, and then go do your work. Like, how are you going to perform well in that kind of a company? Like you have no idea what's going on. You have no idea how the culture works. You have no idea what's really expected. Nobody hands you out like a clear KPIs or whatever. Nobody really talks to you, onboards you, gives you enough context. So I think, the delegation mistakes is, not onboarding the person properly at all. And then when we're talking about delegation, I think, if you want to have a task taker on the other side, or if you want to have just a company that's like very founder based, yes, just outsource tasks. Like you can just outsource tasks, but it's not going to end up well, because then you're just going to outsource tasks, but you're not going to outsource your brain. And I think the mission here should be, I need to transmit whatever is happening here to my departments, to the people that are working here, so they will know not what's the task at hand, but why we're doing that task, why we're not doing it the other way around, and how this task ties to the bigger picture. And then only when people have that context, they can then make sound decisions, they can then improve the processes, they can then improve the company, that they can then just like deliver more value to the company. But if you hire people too fast, if you onboard them too fast, if you, when delegating, you don't share enough context, then it's more or less you're just going to have people who are always going to wait for your instructions, who are not going to innovate at all. So I think that's the main trap that a majority of founders find themselves into. But I do understand why, because like you're a founder or a CEO and you're like, I just don't have time to transfer context. I just don't have time to download my brain. I just need somebody to do this. Okay, like fine. But then you have to be okay with the fact that that person is never really going to be able to think on their own. Or if they will probably think in a totally wrong direction because you haven't gave them context. They have to now imagine what the context is. And usually they're going to imagine the wrong thing. So I don't know. That would be my take on delegation.
No, I
Mistakes.
really like it. Yeah, I think it's, again, from the very, very get-go of the onboard and making sure people know like where they should be heading, those KPIs, like what's expected of them, so that then the founders aren't like holding on to control. Because I guess if people don't know what direction they're going in, then obviously the founder is going to hold control and perhaps not trust different people because they weren't told where they should be going. So needs to, as you say, get like embedded from the get-go, find out if this task was presented, what's the best way to do this. And sometimes tasks are completely new and projects completely have never been done before, and they go along and work along, but the people in the team should be able to do that rather than the founder itself. I think like they can create the vision and where projections for the quarters and delve in, but yes, if they...
I mean, and here is then, sorry to interrupt you, but there is also then, it depends on how skilled the founder is at delegation, because like if you just read the simple delegation books or whatever, like there is, for example, one delegation technique that's called like 10-80-10. It's a very simple technique. It's something that apparently Steve Jobs was using a lot. At least that's what I read. So it's like, okay, so you have a new project, right? And let's say you as a founder decided that you guys as a company are going to do that project. Now, there is obviously a way on how you can just be, guys, this is a project, do something with it. But then again, that project is probably going to go into the wrong direction because like founder didn't even say what's expected. Then there is the other way, which is like founder just saying like, oh, this is a new project, we've never done it, I don't really trust my team, so I'm just going to do it myself. So that's also stupid. But if you go like 10-80-10, you're like, okay, you have a very strong intro brief with the team who is qualified and team that you trust. You have a very strong intro brief. You talk about expectations, you talk about ideas, you together, or like they like put together a plan. And then you just have those small check-ins in the middle. Okay, once plan is created, I want to see it, I want to have another Q&A session. Good. Once that is done, I need to meet with you in 10 days. Again, please come back to me with like report, with updates, with things where you don't really know what to do. And I will try to give you my opinion if I will even have an opinion. Then you just go like that. So you basically get involved only at the beginning, and you just do those micro touch points in between. But you gave the team the autonomy to do basically all of the main decisions as long as they are connected to whatever was said on the intro brief. So I think if you know how to delegate and how to communicate with people, then it just gets easier eventually.
Absolutely. I think it's like setting those clear expectations so that when there's a decision to be made, people can make it, and then you can maybe drop in a little bit further down the line. Yeah, I really like that. Okay, so I guess as we're speaking about the sort of the future of hiring and your company as well, but also I guess AI as well couldn't be introduced here because people are saying that's changing their time and how much time they spend on things, but really helping, or is it just creating more tasks and everything? So that's a side question and a side topic anyway. But I guess as we spoke about before this podcast, that you're talking about like reclaiming 60 hours in a month. It'd be really interesting to just maybe give an example of perhaps what it looks like from like a founder's point of view.
Yeah, of course. Look, I will tell you. I can tell you an example. I'm just gonna give you the details without like revealing who that person exactly was, but it's she, and let's call her Rachel. It's not her real name, but let's call her Rachel. Okay, so Rachel came to us, and obviously when people come to us, they cannot just buy online. They have to do a free strategy session with us for us to even figure out if this is a fit or not. And when she came to us, and she was like and she still is like a founder slash CEO of like a very successful company actually, who sells, let's just say, pants. I'm not just pants, some sort of a pants. And they have like this huge social media following. They have this like amazing team. They sell some of their revenue comes from e-commerce, and they're also in retail stores. So this is, for example, like one of the people that we obviously still work with. And then when Rachel came to us, she was like, on that first initial session, if I have the right information, she was like, I really think it's time for me to get an executive assistant, because like I haven't been on proper vacation for 4 years. And okay, so that was the first data point. And then once we, asked other questions, we figured out, okay, like, so what's really going on across the company? So she was a CEO and founder, but when you're a CEO and founder, obviously you do a lot of things on a daily basis. And as a CEO and founder, you would want to be spending your time on the things that create the most value, not on the things that create the very small value. So what she was doing for majority of the day was she was dealing with her emails, dealing with her calendars, because she was traveling a lot. She was also like booking her trips and figuring out like the best way to travel somewhere, and like the timelines and everything. Because her company is funded by investors, she also had to like manage those investors, talk to those investors, send updates to those investors. And because her team was already like 15, 20-ish people, she was also some sort of a chief of staff to herself, because like she was like that medium between the team and herself, and then basically all communication flew through her. So she actually had to handle like a lot of the team members from communicating with them in one way or another. So she came to us, and then we just started like step by step, like we usually do. Okay, what's the lowest hanging fruit? Where can we first help you out? And she was like, okay, calendars, emails, travel, just take that away from me. And we obviously, as we were getting context, we obviously took that away from her. Now she's not even touching those things anymore, I think. Or maybe she just like her and her assistant, maybe they do like a once per day check-in on those things, but like she doesn't really touch them anymore. Then after we managed that, we went to like, okay, how do we take the investors away from you? And then eventually, how do we position our EA as some sort of a chief of staff, or at least communication bridge between like your key team members and yourself? And then once we did that, I mean, none of our clients, to be frankly honest, I know we have that KPI, and I know we deliver on that KPI, but like none of the clients have the time to actually count, okay, am I saving 60 hours this month with DonnaPro or not? But the point is, what is a testament that whatever we're doing with her is working is like, I think 5 months later, she went on her first vacation after like 4 years plus 5 months. And when she came back, she was like, when I went on vacation, okay, first of all, I already forgot how it is to be on vacation. But when I went, I was afraid that, there is going to be a lot of emergencies. My assistant is going to call me every day. But like my phone was silent. And for the first 2 days, I couldn't even believe it. So I still checked it for the first 2 days. And then only on day 3, I was able to really unplug, like mentally, like detach from everything, because I saw that everything is being handled. And now I came back refreshed. I got these new ideas. When I was the business, I was able to reconnect with my family, etc. So those are the stories that are a testament that, the executive assistant concept and also DonnaPro is working. And just if you think more like broadly, if you ask more or less any business owner, like, hey, when you hired your executive assistant, and assuming they were at least decent, we have to assume they were at least decent. If they were terrible, that doesn't apply. But if they were at least decent, did your life become easier or harder? And obviously everybody's going to say easier. So I think that just and if you overall look at any like business frameworks, they all talk about the fact like if you want to scale the company, grow the company, detach yourself from day to day, you need that hire. So yeah, does that answer your question to some degree?
No, definitely. Yeah, I really like that. And then I guess let's go into that sort of the future of work and leadership to sort of round up this whole conversation. I know you've spoken about being sort of an advocate of sustainable productivity. What does this sort of mean in terms of the context of remote work?
Yeah. So, first of all, is the mindset. So when I hire or when DonnaPro hires, we're like, okay, if we're hiring that person, we want them to be here for at least 5 years. So we're not hiring to fill out the short-term need. We're not hiring to do whatever. We're hiring that person to be here for at least 5 years, or at least that's our idea. Obviously, if we perform, if they perform, but the intention is they have to be here for 5 years. So your mental frame shifts because now you're asking, okay, how do I make this sustainable for 5 years in a row? No, not how do I optimize for the current moment. And then we then developed, internal rules, internal policies that we really stick to. So, some of them are like, first off is in terms of internal communication between corporate team members or between corporate team members and EAs, there is a rule that the only thing we expect from all team members is that they check internal comms once per day. And I shit you not, when people, sorry for my language, but when people see that for the first time, they're like, no, you have to be kidding me here. This cannot be a rule. Like, I'm going to die if I don't check my email at least 5 times per day. No, like, if you're going to check your email, like internal comms, like more than once per day, we're going to actually be disappointed, because that means you're sacrificing your productivity just for you to have that dopamine hit that you don't need. Because then we have another rule, which is like, look, check your internal comms for once per day so you can be in deep work state as much as you can. But then if somebody really urgent happens, we're going to use phone. I know this is pretty weird to hear for like younger generations, but we actually call each other when there is something urgent, because otherwise the default program is, if there is something urgent, they will ping me on Slack. So I have to be always available on Slack. So it's very confusing. So with us, it's very simple. Like if you work at DonnaPro, in terms of internal communication, you do your check once per day, and whoever is sending you an email or whatever, they know that you're going to reply to them in the next 24 hours. And when we say that, we're expecting you to reply in 24 hours, that doesn't mean you have to complete whatever we send you in 24 hours. That just means you have to let us know in 24 hours, hey, I saw that, I got it, that will be done by next Friday, or whatever the communication is. Or, hey, I saw that, I got it, I'll think about it, and I will get back to you in 2 days, or whatever. So the only rule we have is like, you have to close the loop within 24 days as to what your next action step is going to be. So this is the first rule. And then also then we have like a no notification policy. So by default, like all of the notifications like Slack, Asana, email, like all has to be off in terms of like team to team communication. And then we also have like a memo that team members read when they join, and it actually has the same title like the memo. Or I mean, you referred to that phrase before, because you said there has to be a permission to adjust. So we actually have that rule and we live by it. And it's like whenever somebody joins, we give them that memo to read, like, hey, we're giving you an upfront permission to ask for adjustment anytime you will need an adjustment. If that means you have to go from full schedule to like a part-time schedule for 2 months because you have an urgent family situation or because life happened, reach out to us. We will understand. And like, if that happens, we're going to find a way to work this through, because again, we're optimizing for next 5 years, not whether you're going to be able to work full-time for the next 2 months. So when people read those things and when they then actually start working and they see that we mean it, then it becomes sustainable. Now, does that mean that all of our team members stay forever? No, because like if there are performance issues, if maybe there is a cultural misalignment that eventually shows, or if, I don't know, we just need somebody else at that position eventually, and if we cannot figure it out, okay, we will part ways. But just by default, I understand that our business or any business is really retention based, because if you're constantly like changing your internal team, like, you know how it is. It just becomes like, instead of you being focused on growth, you're just then focused on changing the team members, transferring them context, then you transfer them context, then they leave. And it's just this like a loop that goes forever. So I think in my terms, like, yes, productivity has to be sustainable. And coming back to extreme ownership, it's your responsibility as a CEO or founder or the main figure to make sure you actually develop that culture, and then actually to like deliver on that culture. Because if we have a rule, you don't have to check your comms internal for 24 hours. And then I send you an email and you don't reply in 2 hours, and I call you and I'm upset. Hey, why didn't you reply to that email? Then I defeat my whole purpose. So you then, whatever you decide you're going to do in terms of sustainability, you then actually have to stick to it. So yeah, that would be my take.
Yeah, no, I really get that. I think, as you said at the beginning, it's like balancing those goals so everybody knows and can be accountable when it comes to it daily, and like setting those boundaries so that once you've answered it, you give maybe a time prediction of when that's going to be complete, and it helps everyone keep aligned, but also, yeah, sets those boundaries so that people aren't constantly being sort of touched at and called. And yeah, I like the phone thing. I think sometimes I've seen where people have like in their calendar like 2 hours every day blocked out, which is just for like emergency calls or like random calls, and you can just book a huddle in on Slack, or you can just book a random.
That's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like a little 2 hour window or something, and it says like, in these 2 hours, if you need something urgent, you can call me. But apart from that, I will be deep working. And I think that was quite nice, because it was like, if something goes in at that time, then the call happens, and there's sort of nothing else you can do. And it was more from a sort of founder's point of view, in case they needed them for an hour every other day or something like that, or maybe 2 hours a week. And it was just sort of helps with that. Yeah. Setting the boundaries, but also making sure everyone knows what their goals are. So yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, and then also like, I mean, like the hours you set for your team. I mean, like we don't clock hours, like we clock outcomes and results. So I don't really care how much somebody is working at the end of the day. But like, if you say, hey guys, like we are not going to have meetings outside of, let's say, 9 to 5 or 9 to 3 or whatever you said, then you really have to stick to that rule as well. So like, then if you demand team members to be on meetings at 7 p.m. their local time, like again, you have like a problem, and it's not going to be sustainable. So that's also one of the important aspects in terms of like, okay, from when to when you're expected to be, or from when to when the meetings can in theory happen. So that's also an important rule, I think.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask about sort of the mindset shift, but I know we've discussed it. So I think pulling into this section now, is there like a piece of maybe advice you'd give every listener listening in terms of like adoption, this delegation and trust? I think you've really sort of summed it up already, but if there was a way,
yeah. Well, look, I really hate giving advices. I mean, I know I do in between, but like, the advice that is right for one person might not be right for other person, because it all depends on like what your goals are. Because like, if your goal is to have a lifestyle company of 5 people, then the advice to you is going to be different than if you want to scale your company from 10 to 200 people and like have this crazy evaluation and just, just grow. But overall, I think in terms of trust, delegation, remote culture, I think that every CEO and founder, including myself, like sometimes when I'm not sure how I'm performing and how I'm developing the team, what I do is like, okay, Filip, let's just run a scenario. Let's say that next week you would take a vacation for 10 days. And let's say you would not be available, or you would have some sort of a life emergency. If you would not be there for 10 days, how would the team perform? Would the performance of the whole company dip? Would it stay the same, or would it even be better? Okay, if it would be better, then you really have to ask yourself what you're doing. But you know what I'm saying. And then if you pass that and you're like, okay, if I would be gone for 10 days, nobody would really notice. Good. That's a very cool thing. And then you can extend that mental exercise. And then you're like, okay, but what if I wouldn't be here for 30 days? Or what if I wouldn't be here for 90 days? And then basically, once you reach a stage where a company would do just fine, the same, or even better when you would not be around for 90 days, that really means that now you are at a point where you can really just move back from being the founder, or maybe even somebody else can step in as a CEO, or maybe I don't know, you can just exit if that is your desire. But like just that test of like, okay, if I step away, if I'm not available for a short or like a bit longer period, what happens? And then if you don't like the answer, and if you say to yourself something like, oh yeah, if I would step away for 10 days, it would be like a mess. Okay, then you have to work on like, first of all, empowering your people, building better systems. You have to work on like delegating certain responsibilities that you still hold. And yeah, I guess that would be my wrap up.
So yeah, I really like that. I think those 3 types of things: empowering, making sure you've got the right systems in place, and yeah, making sure you're delegating those tasks, but making sure there's a lot of clear goals that are set in place for the success of your business. So yeah, eventually you can step away and everything's perfectly waiting for you when you get back. Yeah, I really like that. Thank you so much for this, Filip. It's really gave me a really different understanding on like remote work and how, especially from where you've come from in terms of like that communication side of things, and that where you are now in terms of the leadership style, and looking through it from like a European eye. I think that's a sort of a new little take that I really enjoyed in talking through in terms of the remote and flexible workplace and like the work-life balance. And then as we go into sort of that future of work and the global hiring, looking at those mistakes and how you've sort of got to where you are with this sustainable productivity. So yeah, lots of good takeaway keywords I think you've mentioned there, Filip. And thank you so much for taking the time this hour. It's absolutely flew by. Yeah, thanks again for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, and I want to acknowledge you because you mentioned that acknowledgement is important. You really do a good job at interviewing people. So thank you so much. Because I mean, you're building an audience, and you basically then your mission is to deliver value to your audience. So it really means a lot, probably, to the audience that you're doing that, and just me being interviewed. Like, it was a really good experience. So keep up the good work, and I'll see you when I see you.
Guests like you that make it so easy. Thanks,
Yeah,
Filip.
well, thanks. Bye bye.
Amazing. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.